Another really cool thing you've done related to RLHF is you have traced it back to ancient philosophy and modern economics. So, mentioning Aristotle and the Van Neumann, Morgenstern utility theorem, for example. I don't really know what the VNM utility theorem is, but how do these historical foundations influence current methodologies? And what can modern AI research learn from these early theories?
Yeah, so this is a fun paper with a few colleagues that I started working with at Berkeley, and now we're kind of spread out. This is all based on the fact that like RL is very deep multi-field kind of multidisciplinary history, whereas like it goes way back, and then the notion of preference is a very vague thing in economics, and it's like the von Neumann Morgenstern theory is a foundational thing that essentially it's like you can express um, either all behaviors or all goals as probability and expected value distributions, which essentially lets you do like expected value math over preferences. And then it led to a bunch of debates on whether or not preferences like actually exist and are tractable in any of these things, or if they're actually measurable or not due to the preference shift over time based on context. So these are the kind of things that we take, and it's like ask a lot of questions on how this impacts the modern RLHF process. It's things like is the final model's preferences, which are like we're mapping onto very human terms, is that actually based more on the preference model, the base model, which is scraped from the internet, than the like human preferences that they get from somewhere like Scale AI. So it's like if it's based more on the internet crawling than this $1 million data set they're getting from Scale AI, it's like kind of confusing to the marketing where we're saying we're learning a preference model, but it might not actually do that much. There's other things like OpenAI now has a ton of user data. And it's like, what does the economics literature say about generating data for training that comes from a user context or a professional context where someone is paid to do it and they're paid to act in a certain way? And how does all of this mix? So it's really just like a super long list of questions of like why we should look at other social sciences if we're making grand claims about human preferences and all of these things.
Nice. Well, fascinating. Tons to dig into there for our listeners. Um, Final kind of topic that I planned related to RLHF. I'm sure it'll come up again, kind of organically in the conversation. But you've mentioned that RLHF is not even robust to fine tuning. And so removing the safety layer from models like GPT-4 and Llama 2 can break down the notion of safety. Can you elaborate on the implications of this fragility for the future development and deployment of AI systems?
Yeah, so this is like a specific line of research. There's a few papers that showed that if you take a model like Zephyr or Tulu that we were mentioning, if they have like safety in the data set, if you then go and fine tune it again on some different task, you'll lose some of the behaviors that are quote unquote ingrained in the model. I honestly think this is a little bit more like clickbaity than like actually worrisome, because it's really not surprising given that like if you just look at the amount of compute applied at fine tuning, like we pre-train these models for trillions of tokens and then we apply like a couple billion tokens of compute at fine tuning, and it's like we're not changing the weights of the model substantially. Like we're doing a slight nudge, and it makes sense that a slight nudge could be undone at the same way. But if you to take this to some of the bigger labs, what you hear is that like safety is not just like a single artifact thing. Like safety is much more about a complete system than a model. So like open weight models being unsafe or unsafe, I don't consider to be that big of a deal. It's like if you were to apply them to a free endpoint that everyone on the internet could talk to, then I don't want my model saying good things about Hitler and like all these obvious things. But if it's like a research artifact that you like need to spin up GPUs to use yourself, and it's like a little bit more I'm more open to having these diversity of models exist. And but if you ask Anthropic or somebody, it's like, what happens if like how do you get safety into your model? And it's like it's not just RLHF. Like you need to have safety at the pre-training, any preference model you train, and then all of these models have a safety filter on the output. So like to ChatGPT, it reads all the text generated from the base model, and then there's like a go no go where it will rephrase the text if it gets a no go signal, which is like their content moderation API. So it's like it's kind of a double like it's the type of thing where researchers need to market their work, but it's not as big of a deal as I think it is. It's like, okay, I think it has interesting business downstream things with liability. So it's just like if you want to fine tune a llama model, you normally do that on your own hardware. But OpenAI has a fine tuning API, and if they like claim their model is safe, but any fine tuning on their API that they then host makes it unsafe, like that seems like more of a business problem. Which is like, oh, it's a nice way that open ecosystem might be better off because it kind of breaks the liability chain. But we'll see this research continue to evolve. It's like it's so early at all of these things. We're like a year in.